Once upon a time, the last bastion of democracy in Europe stood on a knife's edge. The people watched for months as a collection of few, daring pilots climbed into the cold skies over the English Channel to do battle and defend their homeland against a tyrannical aggressor. These few, whom many owe so much to, flew Britain's signature fighter, the Supermarine Spitfire. Supermarine is a name that has become synonymous with the Spitfire, so much so that few in the public consciousness are able to point to their previous race planes and flying boats. However, before Supermarine would build their legacy-cementing fighter plane, they were mostly just that, a flying boat and occasional race plane company, with another aircraft of note owing to them, the Walrus, the Royal Navy's flying boat of choice. So, it is rather curious, with the hindsight of history, to see them answer the Air Ministry's specifications for a new fighter plane in 1931, which is where the origins of the Spitfire can be traced to. While they would lose to the Gloucester Gladiator in 1931, Reginald J. Mitchell was not keen on giving up on their Type 224. Whether this was due to stubbornness, a desire to succeed, or perhaps the foresight to know that their plane could become something great is forever a mystery, but in 1934 they would approach the Air Ministry again with their now revised design, using experience learned from the Schneider Trophy seaplanes they used to create to maximize performance. However, this too was rejected, and so Mitchell, with the backing of Vickers Armstrong, the owners of Supermarine, would double down for their work and produce something truly special. It would at the time be called Prototype K5054. However, we can call it what it truly is, the first Spitfire, and it would take off for its maiden flight on March 5th of 1936, 4 months following the Hawker hurricanes. Some issues were discovered with its flight and subsequent test flights, such as the rudder being particularly sensitive, and the carburetor of the Merlin engine flooding during negative Gs, causing engine stalls. The latter fault, however, was not an issue solely with the Spitfire, as the Hurricane suffered the same issue. With the rudder issue being solved and the carburetor flaw being simply accepted as good enough, the Spitfire would enter service and have the Air Ministry order 310. Unfortunately, due to Supermarine's rather small nature and other planes already clogging their production capabilities, proper production of the aircraft would not begin until 1938, delaying its introduction to August 4th of the same year. The initial Mark I Spitfire was an incredible interceptor for Britain's needs, being able to climb to high altitude quickly and outperform almost anything it might run into. And this was just the beginning, for Rolls-Royce was busy working on improving the Merlin engine, and Supermarine were not idle in refining the Spitfire at every turn. This would be perfect timing, too, for in mid-1940, the Battle of France had ended with the evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force from Dunkirk. With France conquered, Germany began turning its war machine towards the tiny isle nation across the Channel, and so begun the Battle of Britain, and their finest hour. Spitfires and Hurricanes, combined with the chain-home early warning radar and Dowding ground control intercept system, would be Britain's shield against the wave of German bombers crossing the Channel. However, Britain had a shortage of pilots, so when those first German bombers arrived, they would pierce this shield and hit the RAF airfields hard, destroying many planes on the ground and facilities. Despite the damage from early bombardments, Spitfires would still fly up to meet the Germans each time they came crossing the Channel, and there were more Spitfires each time they went up. Soon, Germany could not keep up the losses and ceased their air campaign. The Battle of Britain had been won, with the Spitfire center stage of the public's eye, a gleaming angel in the dark time providing hope that they might yet win against their old foe. Wherever Germany went, Spitfires would meet them to push them back, whether it was the Mediterranean Sea, the deserts of Africa, or even the Eastern Front under Lend-Lease. From the English Channel to El Alamein to Sevastopol, there were Spitfires. It would serve as the premier fighter and interceptor of the RAF throughout the war, even across the seas in the Pacific against the Japanese to a lesser extent. Post-war, with the jet age dawning, the later model Spitfires and Seafires would remain in service, even as the Vampire and Meteor jets matured and began entering service in large numbers. Though not as fast as their new jet brethren, the Spitfire and Seafire were still capable of incredible maneuvers at higher speeds, something their jet brothers could not yet achieve. This momentary superiority over jets would leave Supermarine to test out the Spiteful and Seafang, being the evolutionary end of the Spitfire brought to its absolute limit. But these would sadly not see any practical service as the jets were here to stay. In 1961, the Irish Air Corps would retire their Spitfires, and in total, 20,000 planes would be built from 1938 to 1948. Today, 54 airworthy Spitfires and Seafires exist worldwide, with many more in museums across the globe. Many are used in commemorative events, with the RAF holding a few for celebrating the Battle of Britain every couple years, though none are seen commonly in the air racing world due to the rarity of airframes, spare parts, and engine components primarily. Despite that, however, the Spitfire will survive in living memory for years to come, even after the last Spitfire is laid to rest in the museum. Thanks to its usage in media since almost its first flight, it will make appearances in the Battle of Britain film from 1969 by Guy Hamilton and the more recent Christopher Nolan film Dunkirk from 2017. It will never fade into obscurity so long as we talk about the Second World War. For but a brief time, the Spitfire and Hurricane were all that stood between our modern history as we know it and a much darker alternate timeline.